Good morning, Unity of Fredericksburg.
Good morning.
It's good to see everyone's smiling face. It's wonderful to be here. This is, if you've been following along, this is part 7 of a long series of metaphysical talks that I've done. And this wraps up the 2 books that we've been looking at, Metaphysics 1 and Metaphysics 2. This particular unit at the end of Metaphysics 2 is on prosperity. That's going to be our topic today. My Sunday talks seem to be kind of about prosperity because it seems like every week that I've talked, I've taken the collection of ideas that we all have heard over and over again, that underlying substance of what reality is, and I've tried to present it in a new way. And that's really how we come to an understanding of our divinity and of our place in the world, is to take the same information, the same thing over and over again and see it in a new and fresh way. So hopefully today you can hear some of the things that have been said before in Unity, excuse me, in a new and fresh way. And I forgot my little clicker here, so. And I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. Maybe it's just.
Mic is right there.
No, it's off. Just must be my reverberating chest or something. Something's going on. So hopefully these
Is yours on? Did you give them a little thing? Slide it up.
It is on.
Do they have a little insert thing?
Now the light's on.
That's always better.
Let's see. There we go.
Technology.
All right. So today I'm going to give you a PowerPoint. I'm not going to necessarily refer to the PowerPoint other than to just kind of keep myself on task as Spirit helps me walk through these concepts of prosperity. So what I'd like to state before, though, is that some of you know that this is my last talk here at Unity of Fredericksburg for at least a little while. Christina's been an advocate for you all to have me come back. She keeps asking me when I'm going to come back. But I wanted to let you know that I'm not leaving because I'm not enjoying this. I'm leaving because I'm working on my next book, which is called Consciousness Rising. And it's about understanding that we're in the wave of a whole shift in human consciousness we're right in the middle of it. It's wiping out what I've come to call the dominator consciousness that we've been living in for eons, and we are coming into full knowing of our value, of each other's value, of the value of the divine manifestation of everything in the world, and how do we live in that in ourselves as well as in our culture. And this wave is transforming everything. So all of the things that you're seeing that are frightening or are concerning to you are what I call the last death throes of the dominator consciousness. So I'll be working on that book, and as soon as that gets birthed a little more, then I'll be back and probably talk some about that. But one of the first waves of that book is just recently wrote an article on the Parkland shooting and how the wave of change in our gun laws is in process, and our choice or our job is to choose love. Both sides of the gun debate are based in fear, and it's time to start choosing love. So choose love. So let's talk a little bit about prosperity today. Prosperity, again, is that underlying substance that's always there that we can either tap into or we can ignore to our peril. And there's two steps in the process of prosperity thinking. The first step is often the hardest one for us, and that is to recognize divine ideas and divine principles and to live in those in every moment. And the fact of the matter is that we always have an abundance. There is always an abundance in the world. And so the first step is to latch on to the divine ideas that permeate and support and create the world in which we live. We've talked in the past about some of those divine ideas: love, abundance, peace. Find your favorite one and just drill down into that divine idea to make it part of your consciousness. Divine ideas can be seen as seeds of thought. And so one of the analogies that we could use today is that we are tending the garden of our life, and we get to choose what gets planted, what gets nurtured, what gets pulled out and as a weed or as unwanted thought that springs forth. And our tending of that garden is the second step. So the first step is to focus on that divine idea, and the second step, maybe this battery, yeah. The second step is to do our work. So within prosperity, there's a divine matrix that supports all of the world. Just like there's a matrix on this planet that supports all plant life. All plant life comes out of the same matrix on the planet, right? And something generates growth from that seed, whatever the seed is, whether we consider it a positive seed that's going to feed us or something that's going to get in the way of feeding us. So that divine matrix of plant life is, we have the same matrix underlying our lives. That's prosperity. That's abundance. There's a source there that comes through no matter what, and we can tap into it or ignore it. So the second step of the process is for us to do our work, for us to show up. Jesus talked about this in several different parables, particularly when he was talking about talents. He said, if you have a talent, use it, right? All of the parable of the talents were about the mental capacity for somebody as they approached the gift that they were given, right? And he went through different examples of the master talking to different servants who held talents and how they used them or didn't use them. And so basically he said, whatever gift you have, whatever gift you're given as a child of God, use that talent. And that talent will then bring you into prosperity, bring you into the manifestation of who you were created to be. So that's the second part of the process. The first part of the process is to plant those seeds of divine ideas in our mind and hold those and nurture them and grow them, and then to step into the world and to use your talents, to use them in a way that furthers God's work in the world. Because if we are children of God, then we are the offspring of God, and we are the messengers or the hands of God in the world. And so when we are in that place, we are in the flow of prosperity, and everything comes to us in a whole different way. So a lot of times people confuse prosperity with wealth. Prosperity isn't about wealth, and it isn't about poverty. People who are prosperous can be prosperous without a whole bunch of resources at their disposal. Because when you have a prosperous consciousness, you transcend the present state of whether you have things or not. Because you know that no matter whether in this moment you have things or not, it will come to you. That God is good. God will care for you and provide you whatever you need in that next moment. So a prosperity consciousness transcends this idea of wealth and poverty. It doesn't matter. At the end, during our meditation, I've got a video of the Rappahannock River that we're going to meditate on. Imagine, I'll give you a little preview, imagine the river as it's existing, laying there thinking, wow, I wonder if I'll get enough water tomorrow. Or, wait, this is too much water. What am I going to do with all this water? That's wealth and poverty, thinking about, do I have enough? Do I not have enough? The river doesn't need to do that. The river is just the river, and receives and gives everything that it's given. That's a prosperity consciousness. How do we get into that consciousness? Hopefully we'll have a chance to do that at the end of this talk. Whoops. So one of the things that is often discussed around prosperity is lack consciousness. And Unity Teachings makes it clear that there is no lack. Lack simply does not exist. We often can fall into a fear of lack, but the fear of lack is not lack. The fear of lack is a creation in our mind that is a separation from our connection to the source of the universe. Fearing that there's lack anywhere is our separation from God, because there is no lack in God. And we can see in the world that's been created, there's all kinds of ways that we could argue that there's lack. There's all kinds of people that are doing without, that have no water or no food or no resources to cook their meals, no fuel. All of that lack is not created by God. All of that lack is created by our consciousness. And let me give you an example of how I know that. Because anytime humans decide differently, they end up erasing that lack. That lack simply disappears from a shift in human consciousness. So let me give you a couple of examples that fairly recent. The hurricane in Puerto Rico, okay, created some crisis situations, and there was a huge response from humans to help people that were in trouble. So there was a lack of resources, and humans, either through the government or sometimes because the government wasn't responding, or even in spite of the government, came to the aid of people and made abundance where there was lack before. So all it took was a shift of our consciousness to say, we have enough. You think about all of the crises that happen in the world, which now have more and more immediate response from people around the world because of our connectedness through communication and through the internet. All of those we respond to and create abundance. I remember, some of the hurricanes or some of the tornadoes where people would, do these drives around here and, come up with blankets and stuff. Everybody's got an abundance, right? There's enough blankets in this area to supply everybody in Houston that needs a blanket. There's no lack. There's an abundance. It's our consciousness that has to shift. So another example is, some of the humanitarian efforts of famous people. You take your pick. Oprah Winfrey, whoever you want to pick, who goes to a particular part of the world and sees the devastation of this distribution system that we've created for resources and says, I'm going to do something about that. Their consciousness shifts to the point that they create abundance for schools or for healthcare or for resources, for substances, for water. All of that happens because our consciousness shifts. It's our consciousness that creates any lack in the world. And so there is no lack, only our fear of lack. So the key is, what do you focus your attention on? Once again, we've come back around. A couple of talks ago, I talked about the fact that we become experts on what we don't want. We've got to become experts on what we do want. What we do want. Stop complaining about what you don't have or what isn't right. Start focusing. Start putting your energy into what is right. What is it you want? What kind of life do you want to see? What kind of culture do you want? What kind of people do you want us to be? And then let's go about being those people. Let's be those people. Right here, right now. And when we forget, when we get discouraged, when we start thinking negative again, let's lift each other up. Let's say, I know that's not who you are. I know that you are a child of God and you know where life begins and ends. And you know where your source is. Let's get back to that. Let's co-create together the world that we've imagined. Because the only thing that limits us is our imagination. The only thing that limits human consciousness is our imagination. Because everything we've imagined, we've been able to create, good or bad. So let's start imagining what we want and focus our attention on that. I'm focusing my attention on this slide moving. There. So, tending your garden. Again, this is a beautiful analogy. You know, you get to decide what gets planted in your garden. You get to decide whether to pull up some of the things that start growing in your garden. Start pulling up resentment or a sense of lack or disappointment or isolation. Pull those weeds out of your garden and honor and feed those seeds of divine ideas that create prosperity. Because what I know is that whatever we leave in our garden is going to flourish, is going to have an abundance. If we have hatred in our garden, we're going to have an abundance of hatred. We're going to grow a bumper crop of hatred. So pull up those things you don't want, leave in the garden the plants of love, the plant of peace, the plant of prosperity, the plant of connection, the plant of awe. Leave those in your garden and let it grow into a beautiful representation of the matrix that informs and supports everything in the world. So, one of the things we've learned as children is when someone does something nice for us, we're supposed to give thanks. We're supposed to be grateful, right? Well, unity teaches us that being grateful before we even get it is even better. It's like fertilizing your seeds, right? So, give thanks before it even happens. You want a new career, you want a new job, whatever it is that your heart desires. Start thanking principle for manifesting that before you even see any evidence of it. Give thanks. Give thanks for everything. Everything, whether it's even come into your physical vision yet or not. Giving thanks is a key to fertilizing your garden, to keeping it going. Don't wait until, you've got the evidence that it's in your hand. Start right now. Give thanks. So Jesus talked about how hard it is for a rich man to get into heaven. What we know about that statement is not that he was talking about the amount of resources the person had. He was talking about the consciousness of that person. That the consciousness of someone who has accumulated a lot of wealth generally is focused on accumulating and maintaining that wealth. In the sense that, that's where my work is in the world, where that's what makes the rich man hard to get into heaven, is because he's got the wrong focus. Instead of having the focus on, I could have everything or nothing and I'm still good. So one of the concepts that's talked about quite a bit that we've really lost sight of is the fact that we are stewards. We are stewards of everything we own. Everything we own. everything. You name one thing that you really own, you're just borrowing everything that you've ever had. And it will, pass its way through. So if you are a steward rather than an owner, then you recognize that true ownership comes to God. God owns everything. We just are stewards. So if we don't own anything, then what's our steward responsibility? Our steward responsibility is to honor the gift and use it in a wise way that manifests God's will in the world. And so it's just passing through us as it moves through the energy of the universe. So this material talked a little bit about the fact that the Old Testament was the law of equal distribution. And that's probably most apparent in the Old Testament saying of an eye for an eye. You give somebody 50 cents, you should expect back 50 cents. Equal distribution. Jesus said, that's out the window. That no longer applies. Jesus talked about the law of increase. Equal distribution is a human creation that is not true. Jesus talked about the law of increase where you ask and you'll get more than you ever imagine. In fact, he said, ask and you shall receive. Pressed down, shaken together, overflowing. That's what you're going to receive. That's not equal distribution. That's the law of increase. Just keeps coming, keeps flowing. How do you get into the flow? You just gotta get into that flow and stay in there. And the way to get into the flow is the law of giving and receiving. If you're just receiving and gathering up because you're afraid of tomorrow, afraid of not having tomorrow, then you've lost the whole concept of prosperity and the whole concept of the law of giving and receiving. Everything has to have an inlet and an outlet. The inlet is you receiving, the outlet is you giving. So in most faith traditions in the Christian tradition, there's the concept of tithing, which a lot of us have, kind of a love-hate relationship with, I think. But maybe this will give you a little bit different perspective on tithing. Tithing is just priming the pump. Tithing is purposely putting yourself into the flow of the universe by saying, I'm going to start the outlet because I know that behind me the inlet is going to be flowing, and the more I can flow this outlet, the more the inlet starts coming in. So I've put myself into the flow of the universe, and by practicing giving, then I am opening myself up to receiving. And it also helps us to understand that everything is from God anyway. So giving 10% to the person that gave you 10% or that gave you 100%, should be a no-brainer. but it helps us to get into that flow and to be in the river instead of on the sideline or in some little eddy of pool that doesn't have any inflow. It gets us into the flow. Whoops. So it's important to receive freely too. A lot of times we have trouble receiving. Receiving is as important as giving. We've created this illusion in the world, in America in particular, that we've got to be independent. We've got to, be our own person and not have to rely on anybody. That's garbage. There's no way that anyone has ever existed in the world that hasn't relied on someone else. It's impossible. So let's abuse ourselves of that illusion. Every one of us needs other people. Every one of us needs to receive. Every one of us needs to give. It's the law of giving and receiving from our Creator. Whoops. We've talked about tithing. We've talked about stewardship. Whoops. Got two more. Prayer. I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian church, and our main form of prayer was begging God for things. Right. Yep. So prayer for prosperity is not about begging at all. It's about recognizing yourself in the flow. It's about recognizing how beautiful it is to be alive and to be abundant and to have everything you need in this moment. Each of us in this room have everything we need right now. There's nothing lacking. There might be things we want, but there's nothing that we need that we don't have. We all have our heart beating. We all have air we're breathing. We all have everything we need right here. And so prayer becomes being in that place of being connected to Source, of knowing that you have everything you need. So this one I'd like to read to you, because this one gives us the view of the future. When love, the universal magnet, is brought into action in the consciousness of our race, it will change all of our methods of supplying human wants. It will harmonize all the forces of nature and will dissolve the discords that now infect earth and air. That's the power of love, to transform anything and everything that's ever existed, that humans could ever create. And if we, as children of the creative force of the universe, have access to that power, then how can we not feel prosperous? How can we not feel like we've hit the lottery just by being alive in this moment? So I'd like for you to take a minute and get ready for our meditation. Melvin's going to set it up. This is a video of the Rappahannock. I climbed out into the middle of the river one day and took this video, and I'd like for you to just try to put yourself in the position of being the river and feeling the abundance of water. Just take a few moments to imagine that you're not human, that you're really the river. And now, if you'd care to, just close your eyes and imagine that flow flowing through you and through your life, through all the aspects of who you are, your physical being, your emotional being, your intellectual being, and your spiritual being. The outpouring of the love of the universe. Ever flowing. And as we draw our time of meditation to a close, I'd invite you to bring that flow into your waking consciousness, into all your activities. Set your mind to hold that divine idea that there is an ever-present flow from the universe in and through your life. And from that place, know that you are prosperous beyond all your imagination in all of your ways and in all of your days. And so it is. Amen.